Welcome everyone, it's Jeff Rich and this is a special bonus post from the Burning Archive, the 7 outcomes of the Alaska Summit and the 5 whys of the conflict. Will the USA at last take the road less travelled by? Of course, I normally give my full voiceovers to my paid subscribers. I'm making this available for everyone for this special post, but do consider going to jeffrich.substack.com and upgrading to become a paid subscriber. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. Robert Frost. After the Alaska Summit, will the USA at last take the road that this nation has less travelled by, the path of peace? Has it finally disavowed the Cold War aim to freeze the conflict? Has it committed itself and Europe to negotiate peace with Russia? In this extended bonus post, I assess 7 outcomes from the Alaska Summit and explore the deeper causes on which we all may act to resolve this war. This discussion builds on my just-released discussion from last week with Joel Jenkins of Bogan Intelligentsia, and there's a link to the YouTube video of that interview on the Trump-Putin summit and the 50th anniversary of Whitlam sacking in the post. After Alaska, there are grounds for hope that peace may be near. Michael von der Schulenburg, the former UN official and member of the European Parliament, described the Alaska meeting on Glenn Deason's program as a game changer. Pascal Lataz and Glenn Deason both expressed optimism that the USA may stumble forward in pursuit of peace against the last-minute objections of the Europeans and its own imperial war faction. Nikolai Petro expressed optimism that the summit may initiate a process for reconsidering the shared security interests of Europe, Russia and Ukraine. Most significantly of all, of course, the most able participant in the summit, President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, reported to his own senior leadership that the visit was, quote, timely and quite useful. In his publicly screened preliminary remarks prior to his confidential briefing to senior officials of the Presidential Executive Office, the government, the State Duma, ministries and agencies on the outcomes of the meeting, the President expressed cautious satisfaction with progress. Quote, "We definitely respect the US administration's position, which wants the hostilities to stop as soon as possible. So do we, and we would like to move forward with settling all issues by peaceful means." The conversation was very frank and substantive, which in my view moves us closer towards making necessary decisions. Moving closer to making necessary decisions, however, is a long way from game changers, historic summits, turning points in history, or the rebirth of dreams of the common European home. It is also a long way from the rants about bombshells, brick spatters, steamrollers, or one or other party crushing the other. What really happened in Alaska? In my experience, academic, journalistic, think tank and Western political commentators often fall into common traps of reading diplomatic meetings or negotiations between governments of any kind. They focus on the optics, the big picture, their theories, the call of who won or lost, but they do not focus on the actual process of diplomacy and the matter at hand in the conversation between leaders. How to move us towards making necessary decisions. Those decisions are often detailed and dull. They do not describe world orders, but they prescribe orders of proceedings. They do not envision grand strategies, but they plan small-scale work that will allow the testing of practical intentions and capabilities. No one awards points for the outcomes of these meetings. They are part of a repeated game. The parties know they need to talk tomorrow and that the matters at hand are best managed rather than solved. They know the stakes at risk for these interlocutors, life on Earth. They realise a journey of 1,000 miles begins with one small step, and that if one party falls at the beginning or strays off into the scrub of war, rather than the path of peace, the other can return to pick him up and escort him back to the track of diplomacy. At Alaska, Russia stopped, turned back to where the USA had fallen in the brambles off the track. Vladimir Putin raised his wayward partner from his fall and showed him the path he should follow. Crestfallen, Donald Trump accepted his enemy's health and returned to a path for peace. None of us know yet how long they will walk this path together. My reading of the Alaska Summit is informed by these background assumptions, close observation of the diplomatic processes of all belligerent states in the Ukraine-Russia-NATO war, and my recent reading of Christopher Clark, The Sleepwalkers, How Europe Went to War in 1914. Clark's book is a brilliant account of the highly dynamic decision positions occupied by, this is a quote by the way, highly dynamic decision positions occupied by the key actors before and during the summer of 1914. In many ways, it is a salutary antidote to arguments about inevitable rises and falls, destinies for war, or fixed continuity of agenda. History is made by an indecipherable weaving of driving forces, individual agency, and contingency. Sheer luck, good and bad. Published near the centenary of World War I, Clark represented a shift in perspective by historians on the causes of the war. Quoting from his book, The Sleepwalkers, some of the most interesting recent writing on the subject has argued that far from being inevitable, this war was in fact improbable, at least until it actually happened. From this it would follow that the conflict was not the consequence of a long-run deterioration, but of short-term shocks to the international system. With this in mind, the book aims to show how the pieces of causality were assembled that, once in place, enabled the war to happen, but to do so without over-determining the outcome. I have tried to remain alert to the fact that the people, events and forces described in this book carried in them the seeds of other, perhaps less terrible, futures. Keep in mind this contemporary approach to causality and contingency when you read, watch and listen to the proliferating commentary after Alaska on the diplomatic manoeuvres to end the war in Ukraine. Root causes of this conflict will be interpreted differently decades from now, but diplomats cannot wait that long. They must weed out the causes of the war and water the seeds of less terrible futures. There are the seeds of a peace agreement planted at Alaska. How well, how well will they grow? There are no formally documented agreed outcomes of the summit. Every interpreter is making a story from glimpses, hints, gestures, and the statements of the leaders and other government officials. My initial assessment inferred three core outcomes from this transient evidence, and my note and tweet or X of those three outcomes is posted in the post. They were that leaders confirmed and or advanced the March decisions of the Riyadh Foreign Ministers meeting. The USA likely agreed to get Ukraine and Europe in line to stop threats and attacks on Russia, and Putin gave Donald Trump the diplomatic cover of saying it was indeed Biden's war. The 7 outcomes of the Alaska summit. Let me restate those 3 points before adding 4 more observations based on the statements of the 5 main belligerent parties, USA, European Union, Britain, Ukraine, and Russia, about how this war might end, and yet may still improbably continue. 1. Affirmation of the March 2025 Riyadh Agreement. First, the leader's statement at the press conference and subsequent briefings focused on the 3 core issues that were agreed at the level of foreign ministers in the Riyadh meeting in March 2025. Those 3 issues, I assessed at the time in this video, were the re-establishment of normal diplomatic relations between Russia and the USA, the establishment of a process to resolve the Ukraine conflict, and the development of economic cooperation and investment in domains like the Arctic, resources, energy, and space. These 3 issues were stated in President Putin's press conference statement, and there's a link in the post. Russian-US business and investment partnership holds tremendous potential, he said in Anchorage. His remarks emphasised that Russia is an Arctic, European and Indo-Pacific power, and there should be a resumption of region-to-region contacts, including between the Russian Far East in the Pacific and the west coast of the USA. President Putin succinctly stated the other 2 points, quote, "I hope that today's agreements will become a reference point not only for resolving the Ukrainian problem, but also for resuming the pragmatic business relations between Russia and the United States." To return to these points is not a breakthrough so much as the end of a false start. When the Riyadh summit happened in March, some commentators such as Alexander Mercouris got carried away with Trump mania speculation that a leaders' summit was just days away. In the end, it took 5 months before the leaders of the 2 states could ratify the tentative Riyadh agreement and take the first steps along the road less travelled. Over those 5 months, the USA and its leaders went on a bender of supremacism that almost destroyed the delicate seeds of peace. It fought and lost a trade war with the world. It bombed civilians in Yemen before withdrawing from the Red Sea. It supported genocide and shielded war criminals. It planned, sponsored, and likely executed terror attacks on Russian soil and drone attacks on Russia's nuclear strategic bombers. It bullied Europe, Japan, Australia, India and others to get trade deals in which it achieved nothing but headlines. It issued ultimatums, threats, and ridiculous boasts. It pretended to broker peace in Kashmir, Cambodia, and the Caucasus. It fought with Israel a war of imaginary obliteration in Iran, from which it retreated wounded. It blundered and blustered and blew up its soft power all around the world. The last outburst of this nonsense was just 2 weeks ago, with threats to Russia and India that there would be severe consequences if they dared to defy the USA's will. Thankfully for the world, Russia, India and China, in consultation, forgave the wounded monster, screaming in the undergrowth off the track of peace. Vladimir Putin took his wayward partner by the hand and showed him the path he should follow. Crestfallen Donald Trump accepted the help. He desperately needed a win. And if you're listening on YouTube, you can go over to jeffrich.substack.com, become a subscriber there, and you'll be able to read or listen to the rest of this post.